All right, so I know we've talked a lot about Canadian egress projects over the last few months, and that's for good reason. It's one of the largest and fastest growing basins in North America, so we will need new pipelines to serve that higher production that's coming out of there. So we had some interesting disclosures in earnings, some interesting disclosures on some applications to the states on some of these projects, particularly some of Enbridge's projects. So I thought I'd walk through some of the new things and some of the enlightening pieces that I took away from some of those filings and some of the earnings disclosures. So let's dive in here. So just to level set here, I think one of the big pieces of news this earnings season was mainline optimization 2 for Enbridge. They announced that they're going to delay the upstream piece of that and focus on the downstream pieces of it first. So let's talk about MLO1, and we'll talk about MLO2, and we'll talk about the way that this oil probably is going to flow into the US and flow around the US, and kind of the clever way that they're moving some of this oil around. And I know we've talked about some of this, the splits between the lights and the heavies and how this is going to flow, but we did get some more disclosures on how big some of these expansion projects are going to be. So I wanted to walk through this. So I have a few of the pipelines up that Enbridge owns. So in green here, this is Platte. So this is bringing Canadian barrels that are coming in on Express Pipeline, which is also owned by Enbridge. And this is what it does today, essentially. It's bringing Canadian barrels, some Rockies barrels as well, bringing those into the Wood River area here in Illinois. We have Spearhead, which is in yellow here. So this is bringing barrels that are mostly probably Canadian barrels coming in from Enbridge's main line, which is in blue here, or the Lakehead system, coming in down here and then moving those into Cushing. So as part of mainline optimization 1, one of the key features of mainline optimization 1 from a downstream standpoint is the new Southern Illinois Connector project that Enbridge has sanctioned and is working on as a JV with Energy Transfer. So remember, this is how these systems operated pre MLO1 and pre MLO2, and then we're going to walk through how they're going to operate kind of as MLO1 and MLO2 take place coming into the future. So a system that was moving Canadian and Rockies barrels to Wood River, and then a system that was moving Canadian barrels from the Flanagan, Illinois area down into Cushing. And we're going to look at how that changes because of some of the projects that Enbridge is doing here. So I'm going to clear this out. So I talked about Southern Illinois Connector. Let's talk about what that actually is. So I mentioned it's a joint venture between Energy Transfer and Enbridge. That's going to be a 50-50 JV. And I'm going to turn it on here. So the dashed lines that you see here are leases. So Southern Illinois Connector is going to lease capacity on some of Enbridge's and Energy Transfer's existing pipelines. So they're going to lease some capacity from Flanagan, Illinois, down to Key, Missouri. They're leasing this capacity on Spearhead. They're also going to lease capacity on Platte from Key to Wood River. This solid line here is that new build that they're building as part of Southern Illinois Connector. So new pipeline in the ground here. And then they're going to lease capacity on ETCOP going down to Nederland. So most of this project is just going to be leased capacity on existing pipelines. The difference is going to be, or the exception to that is going to be the new build that they're building between Wood River and Patoka right here. There will need to be some work done on some of these existing pipes to maybe more terminaling, pump stations, things like that. But this is largely steel in the ground that's already being taken advantage of. So the advantage of that is typically that lowers the cost of doing your project. And I do think that's the case with this project as well. So as part of MLO1, in the recent earnings disclosure, Enbridge has said there's going to be 180,000 barrels a day of new egress capacity. My assumption of that is 30,000 of that is 30,000 barrels per day of that is coming in on Platte. They had previously disclosed that Platte was going to expand and Express was going to expand to bring in 30,000 barrels a day. And then 150 of new heavy was going to come in on the main line. So let's focus on the new heavy coming in here. So some's coming across here, some's coming in from Canada. A chunk of this is going to use the new southern. A chunk of this new egress or this new incremental production or incremental flows coming into the U.S. is going to use Southern Illinois connector. So the applications have stated, and I think Energy Transfer stated it in their earnings as well, that this is going to be 100,000 barrels per day is the commitment they got on Southern Illinois Connector. So that leaves us 180 in, 100 out. I assume that another 80,000 is going to go to Cushing and the Gulf Coast, and that's going to happen via a Flanagan South expansion. So previously they have disclosed, I believe, that MLO1 would be also tied to a Flanagan South expansion that they were doing. So that's my assumption there. So the 180,000 barrels a day that's coming in on MLO1, 100,000 of that roughly is going to go down Southern Illinois Connector, it looks like, and 80,000, my assumption is, will go down Flanagan South here. So that's how the piece of MLO1 works. So let's shift. I'll clear this out, and we'll shift focus to potential MLO2 if and when that gets sanctioned from an upstream standpoint. So we have up to 250,000 barrels per day is what they said could come in on MLO2, coming into the mainline or Lakehead system. From here, you have some options. Now, we talked about Southern Illinois Connector. They have said that this can carry up to 240,000 barrels per day. So as you remember, it was 100,000 of capacity on MLO1, so we have some left over. What's unclear is if there's actually going to be that much open capacity on this line here. So they're still using this line, presumably, and they've said they've recontracted some of the capacity on this line. I don't know if that's just part of Southern Illinois Connector, but it's possible they're still using this line to bring barrels down to Cushing. So I'm not sure how much space on this piece that they'll actually still have left over to use, or this piece as well on Platte. So that's unclear. There's probably going to be some of this 250,000 barrels per day of capacity that can go this way. But they also disclosed on this call that they are prioritizing the downstream part of MLO2 and specifically talk about another expansion on Flanagan South, which again runs this same route as Spearhead down to the Gulf Coast. So part of MLO2 could be tied to another expansion on Flanagan South as well. And they also mentioned, for the first time that I can remember, they mentioned Southern Access Extension is getting expanded as well. So let's just pull up the flows on Southern Access Extension. And you'll see there's roughly 100,000, maybe a little bit less of open space on this pipeline as it stands today. And they did specifically talk about expanding this pipeline as well. So again, 250,000 coming in. Some of that, it sounds like, will go down a Flanagan South piece. Some of that will go down a Southern Access Extension piece where it could go into ETCOP. It could go into third-party pipelines. Remember, Marathon is the JV on this Southern Access Extension, and they own a piece of Capline. So this could actually feed into Capline too, potentially. I think Enbridge would rather have this go into their asset, but they may not. That may not be an option. So of the 250, some of this would go down Flanagan. There may be some space to go down Southern Illinois Connector, and then there's maybe 100,000 to, if they expand it, potentially more, 150,000 of space that could go down Southern Access Extension here as well. So that's I think a good overview of what the downstream portion of MLO2 would look like and how it would fit into a potential upstream piece of the additional heavy that's coming in here. We've talked about where the light would go down DAPL and then up GCAP to backfill the volumes here. But I think that's a good overview of that one. It's kind of a confusing project, but seeing it all on a map, really why I made this tool, was it helps me understand the flows and where things are going. But seeing it all on the map always helps me understand where things are going to flow to and helps me kind of make it concrete in my head. So hopefully it does the same thing for you guys. As always, reach out to us if you have questions on anything. Yeah, I hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll have some some writing content out this weekend like we always do. Reach out if you have questions. Yeah, everybody have a great week.